speaking on behalf of the world, but on behalf of those whom you gave me, because they are yours. All mine are yours, and yours are mine, and I have been glorified in them. And now I am no longer in the world, but they are in the world, and I am coming to you. Holy Father, protect them in your name that you have given me, so that they may be one as we are one. While I was with them, I protected them in your name that you have given me. I guarded them, and not one of them was lost except the one destined to be lost, so that the scripture might be fulfilled. But now I am coming to you, and I speak these things in the word, so that they may have my joy made complete in themselves. I have given them your word, as the world has hated them, because they do not belong to the world, just as I do not belong to the world. I am not asking you to take them out of the world, but I ask you to protect them from the evil one. They do not belong to the world, just as I do not belong to the world. Sanctify them in the truth. Your word is truth, and you have sent me into the world, so I have sent them into the world. And for their sakes I sanctify myself, so that they may also be sanctified in truth. The word of the Lord. As I think about this passage from Acts, about this selection of the new apostle, who's it going to be, and how's it going to take place, and how are we going to decide? And I think a little bit about Mother's Day. And I started thinking about that passage. We got Matthias, we got Justus. I think, well, Justus would, if you had a baby, that'd be a great baby name, Justus. But then I considered what that might mean for that poor kid's lineage. That name would be traced back to the one who was nominated, but was not chosen. Forever the groomsman, never the groom. Or as I used to say when we were a kid, close but no cigar. Not being picked. Yeah, who wants that for their kid? But there he was, Justus. He was going to be voted on to maybe be an apostle. He was maybe going to take the spot vacated by Judas. Came down to the final vote. And he wasn't selected. I wonder, how disappointing was that for him? We probably all had times when we were close to getting something that we wanted or we thought we really wanted, only to be let down because we didn't actually get it. 1996, the basketball team I was working for, the Seattle Supersonics, made it to the NBA Finals. We were going to be playing for an NBA World Championship. And if we won, we were going to get big championship rings. It was exciting. But there was just one problem. We had to play Michael Jordan in the Chicago Bulls. And well, Michael got the championship ring. He got a lot of them back then. There's a lot of good players that never got a championship ring, even though they got close. Sometimes we think we want something, and maybe it turns out it's a good thing we don't get it. Milton Hershey, the founder of Hershey's chocolate. You know what he really wanted to do? He wanted to go on the maiden voyage of this big cruise ship. He was going to be on the Titanic. But a last-second change of plans because of an illness in the family kept him from boarding. He was so disappointed at first. J.P. Morgan, the famous financier, was also supposed to be on board. And later on, Hershey and Morgan formed a group which they called the Just Mystic Club. It's true. Well, I was a finalist for a presidency of a small Presbyterian college up in West Virginia. Came down to me and the other fella. They took the other fella. It was a disappointment. I felt a bit like Justice. Close, but no cigar. Until later on when I met with a person from the Presbyterian Foundation, the folks that do all the financial work for the Presbyterian Church. And he was aware of the financial situation of that small college, and he said, you probably got the best end of that deal. So the passage from Acts that we read today kind of settles in a pocket of time between Jesus' ascension and the Holy Spirit's arrival at Pentecost. Kind of an interesting time for the church. What will God's people do without Jesus there to teach them? What will they do without direct divine guidance? Who will they choose to replace Judas? And how will they choose him? Well, the passage in Acts tells us that there were about 120 believers who were considered candidates. And the driving question is, for them was, how do we whittle down that number from 120? So the answer seems to be, who do we know? Justus and Matthias were nominated because they'd been with Jesus from the very beginning, from the day of his baptism. Think about that. What would that have been like? To be with Jesus from the time he was baptized all the way through his resurrection. Wow. But the text says nothing about their leadership qualities, their public speaking skills, their ability to work with others, their people skills. There was nothing even about, did they look like a leader? Were they tall? Did they have good posture? Did they have hair? Was their beard well trimmed? Were they clean? I imagine in the ancient Middle East, they were probably nominated because people knew them. People knew them and felt comfortable with them. A guy once told me, vote for who you know. Even if you don't agree with their positions, vote for who you know. I said, why should I vote for who I know? Better the devil you know than the devil you don't know. Didn't matter what they stood for. If you knew them, that was reason enough to vote for them. And I'm wondering, is that what happened to Justus? Oftentimes, that seems to be the driving question of all our nominating processes. And if you've been on the nominating committee, you probably ask yourself the same question, like, well, who do we know? And we ask, and that helps us shrink the pool of the candidates that happen to be within our personal circles. During my days of hiring people at the college here, whether it was for faculty or for staff positions, I realized that I kind of needed to look beyond just the circle of people that I knew and that I had already worked with. Instead of asking, who do I know? I started asking myself, who don't I know? Who is out there that has gifts of which I'm not aware? Who could contribute something worthwhile but has yet to be asked? Whose talents have been left untapped? My who don't I know mantra has not always found good results. I've recruited adjunct professors who have ghosted me right before the start of the semester, saying, I'm not going to be able to teach this semester. Well, I have a room full of 30 students, and I got to do something. Or they've done such a poor job in the classroom that it made me realize that the only thing that they had mastered in life was how to interview well. Now, on the other hand, I'm an economist. Now, I'm an economist, so I'm supposed to have two hands. You don't know that joke? All right, time out. A little side joke. Harry Truman, who's president, was talking to an economist. He says, get me a one-handed economist. They say, why? Because an economist say, well, on the one hand, we have this, but on the other hand, we have this. He said, I need some advice. Get me a one-handed economist. Wow. Um, by looking at both hands, I found some exceptionally talented teachers and scholars, so that despite the risk of going outside the circle of who I know, I found some very talented people. So I kept up the practice, this who don't I know? Because it keeps me open to ways in which the Spirit can guide me to new people, to new ideas, guide me in new directions. It's not that I only hired people I didn't know. It was that I wanted to make sure that I considered people beyond the circle of those whom I did know. And doing so was a benefit to the students and to the college. So as I read this passage from Acts, I wonder who would have been chosen if those 120 had asked themselves, who don't we know? A deliberate effort of openness and inclusion might have resulted in different nominees. Instead of Justus and Matthias, maybe they would have thought of Joan or Mary. Imagine how different church history would have been if they had selected a woman back then. There seemed to be lots of Marys running around. So a nomination process open to the unknown can certainly be risky, but it can also be seen as being inherently faithful. Well, after Justus and Matthias were nominated, we read about how they cast their decision, and they made it their final decision by casting lots. Casting lots is a lot like throwing dice. It's not a whole lot different than bunco. Casting lots is mentioned 88 times in the Old Testament and 8 times in the New Testament, including, remember, the Roman soldiers at the foot of the cross who cast lots for Jesus' robe. Well, this ancient election process used to select Matthias actually helped keep their decision grounded in faith. Before the lots were cast, the people prayed for the discernment of God's will. Now, today we would think it irrational to elect our leaders based on a roll of the dice. But casting lots to select an apostle served a purpose. It reminded God's people that they did not know everything or everyone, and that the risk of faith was worth it. Just as it is in the risk of discovering someone new, some hidden talent, some person called by God who just happens to exist outside our personal circle. Now, maybe you have been nominated like Justus and then not selected. Doesn't feel good, does it? But then you find out that God directed your path in the way He wanted you to go. That is, I bet your gifts were recognized in some other way. I could be at a small college in West Virginia, but I tell you what, I'd rather be here with you. If you have gifts of leadership or service, God will find a way for your skills to be brought forth. He won't let your light hide under a bushel basket. I'm sure Justus went on and did great things for the church. And hey, he got his name in the Bible. And for those looking for leaders or for people to help, keep your eyes open. If you look beyond your circle, you may see something unexpected. For instance, consider how you even ended up at Kirkwood. Did someone invite you here? What led you here? And once you got here, were your gifts recognized? Were you selected? So maybe it's your turn to show a favor to someone else and to extend an invitation. And then let the Spirit do the rest.